Welcome to another episode of the Empowered Half Hour. And I say this every week that I'm so excited to introduce today's guest, but I'm so excited to introduce today's guest. I have another Rebecca on. I have author of The Dragon and the Goat. I can't believe I almost messed that up. And she's also a fellow keynote speaker. But I met Rebecca Mountain through a mutual friend of ours who is also on the Empowered Half Hour, Tracy Phillips, the video queen. I talked about barfing on that episode. I know you probably remember it. But she introduced the two of us and said, I think you guys would get along. And then we met and we had like same first names. And then we're both extras. Like, if you're listening, you have to go. If you're listening, you have to go to the YouTube so that you could see like our big, excited arm movements that just happened. But anyway, that was a long intro. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I have been looking forward to this just because our personalities just like instantly clicked like little Lego pieces. And
they did. It was pretty rad.
It is pretty rad. It is pretty rad.
I wanted to bring you on the show because once we got to talking, I was like, oh my God, she has a different way of looking at things, which is one of your, I guess, specialties or uniquenesses. But you just recently released The Dragon and the Goat, your keynote speaking. And I want to know a little bit about how did you come to write this book and what's your backstory?
The journey to the book is actually a little meandering path. So we have to kind of go back.
We're going back in time.
Beyond 15 years. So I grew up in a cult. So that's sort of the first thing to understand about me. And like you said, I see things from a different perspective. A lot of people wonder how intelligent people get stuck in these cult environments or oppressive environments. I guess mine was a religious oppressive environment, but there's other oppressive environments like relationships, even organizations and that kind of thing. And it's because at the base we have fear. And that's what these circumstances prey on. So in the cult, the way I grew up, it was all based on fear. But just over 15 years ago, I started to really question this group. And they terrify you by telling you that if you even think about leaving, there's two ways you're going to die: cancer or a car crash.
That's
and
insane.
So I was miserable. I had married into it. I'd been married for 11 years. I had two small boys. At the time, they were about 3 and 5. And I was terrified because I'm like, I'm going to die and I'm going to leave these kids behind simply because I was thinking about leaving. I was really, really miserable. And then one day on March 17th, 2008, I was rocketing to a meeting at 6:30 in the morning. And I live in Canada. So March is still winter, but I didn't
very cold.
But there was no snow at the time. And as I was going on the on-ramp to get on a 6-lane highway, I didn't see the black ice. And so long story short, I went whizzing over the embankment. It was about a 30-foot drop. My car rolled onto its roof. So the windows explode, the tires explode. I'm crushed against the steering wheel, spinning around at about 50 miles an hour on this 6-lane highway, facing the wrong direction because I'd pulled a 180 as I was like careening down this hill. So I can only imagine the light show happening to the people trying to just go to work. And meanwhile, there's this careening all over the place. And when it stopped spinning, my first thought was, I'm alive. I didn't die. And then my second thought was, they're wrong because I'm not dead. This is my car crash. This was that cataclysmic event that should have like cooked my goose, but it didn't. So then I thought, my third thought was, hey, this is what it's like to be upside down in a car. Because, you know, the movies and stuff. I'm like, I should get out. Yes. I did remember I was on a 6-lane highway. So I let go of my seatbelt, don't gonna hit my head because I was upside down. I crawled up my new skylight, which was formerly known as my passenger door, jumped onto the highway, shook the glass out of my hair because I only had mild whiplash. And I scraped the top of my head when my car had crushed. So I'm not making any eye contact with any of the cars, crawling along the shoulder because I'd made a horrific mess and I'd ruined their day. And I thought, if they're wrong about this, they must be wrong about everything that they terrified me, because they teach you to be small, especially as a woman. I'm not supposed to go to school. I'm not supposed to go to work. I was told I was going to go to hell and all my children were going to hell because I had to go back to work after they were born because my ex couldn't, keep the family going. Anyway, and so there's all these kinds of things. And so it's all just kind of falling apart around me. So by August, I'd left the church. So that was March. By August, I left the church. By October, I was separated. By December, I was divorced. And by January, I was also unemployed because I worked for people in the church who, by the way, fired me over Christmas. and made me play the piano at their Christmas party because I'm a classically trained pianist.
I
And
did not know that about you.
Yes, there you go.
I was trained classical too by my mom, but I don't play because
yeah.
I got my hands hit with the ruler. Put 'em up, put 'em up.
I got the finger in the back of the middle of my back. Sit straight. Okay.
Yeah.
So we get each other very much.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so that was 15 years ago. And I was trying to piece my life back together. But you have to understand, like, because of the way I grew up, I didn't know how to order cable. I didn't know how to go to the movies. I didn't know how to order concert tickets because I was never allowed to do those things. I was not allowed to go to the movies, no TV, no radio.
It's really
no
big if you
kids.
think about it, right?
Yep, just remove all that stuff. So as a girl, pull away makeup, doing anything with your hair because I was not allowed to cut it, jewelry, drinking, parties, sleepovers, prom, boyfriends outside of the church, like any interaction with people outside of the church was considered dangerous. And so the whole world outside of me was considered dangerous. And now I had to be like, how do I fix this? And it took me a very long time to even get that far. So I rebuilt my life, made a couple forays, got one more job, got fired from that too. We'll get to that in a minute. So why I kept getting fired. I figured that one out later on down the road. I figured it out just last year. Anyway, but then I eventually landed on building a social media agency. So $1 million a year, 14 people on my team. I should have been successful. I married my husband and he is a significant upgrade. I've got 2 stepkids on top of my kids and it's just wonderful. And I had everything I should have had. And 4 years ago, I'm sitting on the couch going, why am I still miserable? Why do I still feel like I'm carrying this cult with me? And that's when I started working on this book. Because I
just got the goosebumps.
It was not a fun journey, gotta say, but I started researching, where does my pain come from? Like, what is it that needs to happen in order for me to start reprogramming and reconditioning myself? So I had to recondition not only my mind, but my body, because I'd have visceral physical reactions to certain things. I'd have visceral emotional reactions to certain tripwires. Like Mark would say something and I'd blow. And then I'd be afterwards, I'm like, where did that come from?
I understand. Like I have, as you're talking, I'm relating to, and I'm sure the listeners can too. I mean, we might not have had cult experiences, but I'm thinking as you're talking about visceral reactions to things, I worked in a toxic work environment. It was a narcissistic work environment. Had never been around true narcissism before. And so I was slowly getting controlled, slowly getting brought down to be small, slowly withered away to like where my voice didn't matter anymore. And like it could be in a relationship or a work environment or a cult, but like once you have experienced that, your body remembers.
It does. And to this day, with all of the work that I've done, and the Dragon and the Goat is sort of my strategic roadmap for anyone that has felt small, pushed to the back of the room, told that they don't matter, right? This is how you bring yourself back, because the premise of the book, so the dragon is actually the lizard part of our brain, but lizard didn't sound scary, so I called it a dragon, right? But that's like your fight, flight, freeze, your fawn, your feed, right? So people with addiction, that's where that impulse comes from. The contrast effect, where we compare ourselves to others, and usually we're not the winner when it comes to the comparisons, especially as women with our body image issues. You know, body dysmorphia is a big thing, not only for women, for men as well. It just seems to be more talked about socially, but like all of those factors go into the dragon part of our brain. It's very visceral. It is not the thinking part of our brain. Because we have 3 brains. We have the emotion brain, a thought brain, a logic brain. So a lot of our dragon, and they fire differently. So evolutionarily speaking, so the way I like to describe, because some people, they're creationists, and that's fine. Imagine God created that brain first. So, and if you believe in evolution, that brain got created first, still works. So the dragon part of our brain, the lizard part, is instinctive. We cannot shut it down. I cannot, if someone comes at me aggressively, I cannot stop my body from responding. I don't think it just does. Like someone throws an axe at my head. I'm not like going to calculate the velocity and the speed and wonder, well, should I duck? No,
you're going to
hit the deck. So we can't stop that part of our brain. But what we can do is we can physically shrink what are called the amygdala, 2 little almond-sized things right behind our eyeballs, which secrete a lot of these hormones and create some of these reactions. And so the dragon part of the book is shrinking those literally, and using these really big, scary emotions like anger and fear and guilt and shame
Those are big ones.
as,
Yes.
but turn them into our allies. And that's something I struggled with, because it's a shrink the dragon, not slay the dragon, right? Don't get your amygdala removed. We need them. Control.
I think that's a really important part. And I just want to pause there for the listeners, because there's so much talk about like killing fear or being fearless, which I kind of run it. I love being fearless, but at the end of the day, I have learned to befriend those parts of me, because when I tried to ignore them, there's a saying like sometimes things come out sideways. So it's like when you're not expecting it, you'll have a burst out, or like you said, a reaction. But if you learn to befriend them, they're talking to you, right? There's a message in it. Anxiety is probably my biggest one. I'm a big anxious person, or used to be. I still can go there, but panic attacks, the whole nine. And then I started realizing, I just wanted to give an example for the listeners, and I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on this too, is what I started doing was putting myself even in roles that allows my anxiety to be strength. So now I've always been in sales, but now I'm in like super high end sales, project management, things where my anxiety gets to work. Oh, I get to think about the future. I get to think 10 steps ahead. And then by the time I get to my personal life, anxiety is tired. So, but that's just an example. I love that you said that, because I don't think it's talked about enough. And I just wanted to throw like an example. Hey, this is kind of how I did what you're talking about.
One of the ways that when you talk about those bursts, there's actually a term for that, and it's called emotional leakage, where we take these big emotions and we stuff them, right?
Yes.
But at a certain point, it boils, and then we can't control it. So anyone thinks, I totally control my emotions by stuffing them down. No, you're a ticking time bomb, and it's going to blow, and then you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to hurt others. You're going to damage a relationship. You're going to damage your work or your career prospects. Like it's not a good thing. But if you turn it into like, fear is good, because if you get too close to a cliff edge, it pulls you back. Anger is important because it allows you to stand up for yourself in a situation in which someone is being aggressive or unfair or whatever. That's where anger kicks in, and you're like, hey, hang on a second. Right. And it gives you that little bit of that adrenaline to really stand up for yourself. Guilt and shame are my behavioral correctional devices, right? So what I do is, if I do something, so say I like to use an example, my son and I, we allow ourselves to be angry. I do not shut him down, but every once in a while we kind of escalate up together. So, because he's a teenage boy, that happens. They always do that, right? Anyway, so this one time we had this argument, and he was yelling at me, and I just yelled right on back, right? So we leave, and I look back. And so what guilt and shame does for me is I can look back on that interchange and kind of go, well, I meant what I said, but I didn't need to yell. I could have done some work there. And so I'm just like, okay, so it allows me to be better, 1% better. Can I be 1% better at having altercations when my son is amped up, so that I don't get amped up? What work can I do to help mitigate those kind of situations? So guilt and shame are actually very powerful. And so with the dragon part of this book, it's really explaining how emotional regulation is actually at the root of our happiness, our success, making money, but no one wants to talk about it because it feels weird. But look at it this way. I talk about it a lot, and sometimes it gets through, and I like to kind of mess around with how I describe it. But imagine this, imagine how many times if you say, I don't feel like going to the gym, it's really hard to go to the gym if you don't feel like going to the gym. And it's hard to explain. And this is where I teach people, like, what do you mean? What does feeling like going to the gym feel like? What are the words that you can describe that create some sort of understanding between the emotion brain, the feeling brain, and the thinking brain? Because that's where we actually take action. But if the feeling brain's like walking this way outside the door and saying, I'm not going to the gym, the body doesn't go with it, and whatever, doesn't matter what you can think, the emotion brain wins, right? The dragon always wins in most of these fights, unless you learn to pull them together. And so if you can retrain yourself to kind of go, I feel like getting healthier, I feel like moving my body because I'm getting older and I'm 47, and I feel like being strong. And I know strength training is important. I don't want to wait till I'm in my 60s and staring osteoporosis possibly in the eyeballs. I'd rather avoid it now. So I feel like being healthy. And you just switch the way you talk about yourself so that your feeling brain lines up with the actions you actually want to take. And then there's no resistance. And so when you can take the big negative feelings and turn them into positives, trick the dragon into actually using it for good, then the reality you want actually comes without a fight. A lot of people fight, they chase happiness. If you're chasing anything, you're going about it wrong.
I love what you said, because here's a practical thing. There's a lot of women listeners on this show and high achievers and stuff like that. I know with women, and I'm just going to use that, we're always striving for the gym. So that was a really good example, or weight loss or whatever. And I love what you're saying, because it made like a little connection go off in my brain. So for me, I have to have fun as an element of me being successful. When just even getting a book out or becoming a speaker, like that stuff is fun for me. So I like, dedication's easy, commitment's easy, resilience is easy. Doing the hard stuff is hard, but the commitment's there because I enjoy it. But I don't necessarily enjoy meal planning and cooking and stuff like that. So when it's come to me and like weight loss, that dragon has like totally controlled me. And as you're saying that, I'm like, oh my gosh, like fun is the missing element. I need to figure out how to make that fun so that my emotional side can take lead. So that was really cool.
Imagine if you did that with everything. So all the things you know that are important, but you struggle to do, it's because the emotional piece is disconnected, or it's just simply not defined. Like I torture my clients, and I say torture because they literally groan when I bring this thing out. The emotion wheel. I don't know if you've ever seen one. There's a zillion of them online. You just type in emotion wheel or feeling wheel and have at it. The one that I use most often has got like 7 key emotions in the middle, like sad, happy, angry, blah, blah, blah. And usually as adults, we'd say we're either happy, sad, or mad. But our brain, our thinking brain, our logic brains don't know what to do with that. It's not specific enough to be giving the proper instructions. So the emotion wheel takes those 7 core emotions and gives it more words, right? So angry is now frustrated, or withdrawn, which is also a form of anger, where we just go into shutdown mode. But withdrawn can then be expanded into numbness. It can be expanded into aloofness. It can be, there's all these different ways that you can describe like one core emotion. And the more complex language you give yourself, the more your thinking and logic brains kick in with the emotion brain. And now you start to process it, which means you're not shoving it down, which means you don't have emotional leakage that could like blurt out at any point in time. And you were always even, because one of the things I did with my research is I wanted to know what the millionaire, trillionaires, and billionaires did to become successful. And an overarching theme is emotional regulation. They practice gratitude. Why? Because it shrinks the amygdala. And why is that important? It limits the amount of emotional reaction to things. They can keep their logic and thinking brains going while simultaneously processing their emotions. That's why they're able to do it. That's why they can handle really complex, super stressful situations. It's not that they're not letting the stress get to them. They're welcoming the stress and kind of going, okay, you can be here, right? And I'm going to keep processing you. So come on in. And with your anxiety, like you were talking about, the best thing you can do is to actually welcome those anxious thoughts. And that's what you're doing with exposure therapy, putting yourself in situations that are super anxious. Those moments, you're like, okay, come on in. I'm not going to
like,
resist
you're
you.
welcome. You're welcome to play. Here you go.
Hang out over here, but you're only staying for a snack. You ain't putting up a tent and hanging out and you're living here with me, right? So when you can teach yourself those processing techniques, breathing, meditation, gratitude, those are the big 3. If you do those 5 minutes a day for 8 weeks, it has scientifically been proven to shrink your amygdala. And that is actually what drives the nervous system, which creates anxiety. Anxiety is not a mental disorder. It's an over-revving nervous system. So if your nervous system calms down through, again, meditation, breathing, gratitude, and there's 20 more strategies in the book, then your whole demeanor starts to calm. And then the second part of the book, the GOAT, which of course is an acronym for greatest of all time, starts to move forward. So I was very small. I played a very small game until I tried to learn, like, what is my greatest? What is great about me? And actually my past and all the work that I did, that's actually really great. And so where we don't allow ourselves to spend enough time is, where is our greatness? A year and a half ago, but we're not taught to. We're taught fit in, but stand out. Very confusing, right? And so with the greatest of all time, the idea is to eschew everyone else's rules. about how you should or should not operate and say, what makes me happy? At the root of our goatness, like you talked about, everything has to be fun. It's because you're seeking your happiness. But people look for happiness. I will be happy when. So it's time-based. I'll be happy when this is, or when I'm here or when I'm there. I'll be happy when my bank account is a certain level. I'll be happy when I find a soulmate. No, you won't. You'll be your same miserable self because that is not going to do it for you. So how do you generate that happiness? And the first part of finding your greatest of all time is answering those questions. What work makes you happy? What people, what schedule, what environment, what things, what experiences. And once you start really getting detailed on that, what you should do with your life becomes really obvious. Because to sit here and kind of go, imagine kids, like, and I think our kids are about the same age. Mine are between 17 and 26. And they have to like stare the future in the face and kind of go, I don't know what I want to do with my life. But you can't.
Facts. And that's a whole, I could go on a tangent. I'm like, how are you supposed to know what you want to do when you're 18? But if you tap into what you're talking about,
if you can just say, what makes you happy? What looks fun? So my son's in mechanical engineering. And
my son too.
That's awesome. Oh my God. We have lots of parallels.
I know, so weird. So,
but okay, son, but like, what industry would you really love to get into? Oh, automotive. Great. And now we've narrowed down the field. And now he narrows down the courses he takes and the experience he gets and the jobs that he gets, but for summer. And now it becomes easier for him to kind of move into that area simply by asking what industry is more fun. Again, tapping into those positive emotions. And so to be our greatest of all time is also to accept and love how you are wired and how you are put together. I am autistic. No one knows that I'm autistic because I don't present as autistic, but about 5 to 10% of women are autistic, but you will never know because we are master imitators, master pretenders. I read books and I imitate. I'll watch you and I will be like, Rebecca sits like this. She talks like this. She goes like this. She does that. And so I will pretend that this is who I am when inside I'm like dying because I'm not the least bit comfortable. If left to my own devices, I will wear black t-shirts and jeans all day, every day. I might just Steve Jobs the rest of my life because I'm just like, I might not do the white sneaker thing, but like I will definitely do the black t-shirt jeans because it's comfortable, it's safe, and it doesn't confuse me. And so one of the things I had to come to grips with was success was not having a team because that's what coaches do. Because I'm a high performance coach. So I write books, I do speaking, but the core of how I help people is I do one-on-one coaching or I do high-level masterminds. And so my autism prevents me from being a very good manager. I can have outsourcing partners, but God help you if you work for me. I just don't do it well. I don't read people well. I'm not good with kind of poo-pooing people along. And I know that's kind of what you got to do. And I'm just not good at it. So I run my business with outsourcing partners and no employees.
And I think that's really fabulous. And like one of the things I want to call out for the listeners is that getting to know yourself intimately, like Rebecca's talking about, is a game changer. Because if you have yourself in the wrong environment, that is not to your strengths, that is not towards your joy, you're going to feel like there's an invitation to feel failure. There's an invitation to feel like there's something wrong with you. But when you realize like you're just not good at managing people, but you're great at building a business and you're great at coaching people and you're fantastic at getting them like way out of their comfort zone into their success. So why not build your business around your strengths?
And
seems to make sense.
It does make sense. And yet there is so much pressure to be in the 2 comma club. Like some people look at me and kind of go, because they'll say my business doesn't make $1 million. Oh, well, you're not $1 million coach. And I'm like, do you know what it takes to get to $1 million as a coach? I've built a business that makes $1 million and the sacrifices and all the stuff you have to make. But at the same time, even though my agency used to make $1 million top line, my bottom line for my coaching practice, I paid like 20 times when I was running that. It's not the top line number, but that's all that people look at, right? And your GOAT really steps forward when you accept yourself for who you are, accept your wiring for what it is, because there are wiring issues. I don't see the world straight. I see it on tilt. You build a life around yourself based on what makes you happy. We are not here to make everyone else happy. That is an offshoot of us being able to be happy within and to cultivate that feeling of contentment and peace because we're not fighting ourselves anymore. Do you think Steve Jobs fought who he was? No, he got fired from Apple and went and created Pixar and all this other stuff. Did it all work? No, but man, what a gift. And then he comes back and then did what he did with Apple. Like, he just didn't care. He was who he was. And there's a lot of people out there, a lot of leaders out there, and that's how they get there. They are there because they're like, I'm not here to try to make you happy. I'm here for a purpose. And they have a vision, they have a passion, they have something they want to bring into the world. And they very single-mindedly do that. That's how you find single-mindedness. Single-mindedness is trusting your mind and believing that where you're going and what you want to do is what's best for you, for your community, for your family, for your friends, for everybody else. You cannot go anywhere in a multi-minded environment where, well, they do this and well, will they do that? And well, maybe I should try that. And maybe I should do that. You can't live someone else's life. You can't run someone else's business and expect to be happy.
100%. I have like 2 questions that I want to ask. I'm like, oh, which one do I want to ask first? So it's kind of been shared. I could feel your passion, but I wanted to ask you directly, like, why are you so passionate about this topic and getting it out into the world?
I want people to recognize, and particularly the vernacular of the dragon and the goat. Usually when I do these talks and people, like, they read the book or they take my courses or they go through my coaching, they actually talk about their dragon. I need people to recognize what's going on. You have
and you gave it a name to it.
Exactly. It's a fun name because it's hard for someone to call their lizard. It's kind of a weird thing to say, but people have often said to me, like, my dragon was really loud today, because that's what it is. But if you can see it for what it is, and then you're like, okay, then how do you bring out your goat? I really want to do this. This is my goat really trying to step into the world. I want people to take control of their lives. At the end of the day, I spent most of my life feeling incredibly out of control. I had rules I had to follow. There was judgment, this life and the hereafter. So it was pretty frightening.
Judgment all around you.
Oh yeah, exactly. I was not coming out a winner on this time. There was no guarantee, right? It was like every day I lived in such fear. Like, it took me 3 years after I left the cult to get into my car, turn it on, and not immediately say, and now I'm going to die. 3 years. It took me. And I don't have that anymore, but I get it every once in a while when I'm driving. I see another car just coming along the other side of the road. Is this it? And imagine how many times when you're driving, how many cars approach you? And every single time a car would come up. Is this it? I'm not even scared of death. I'm just like,
there's an anticipation because
it's conditioned so much.
That's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
And not everyone in the cult creates this, but that's how it was for me. And so my life was not my own. I could not be who I wanted to be. I had to be me, but smaller. I deal with a lot of people who are very emotional. They've always been told, be less. Don't be quite so much. And I'm like,
opposite way.
Everything.
Yes.
The world can adapt.
I just have to like go off that for the listeners. If you have been told you were too small, too much, too anything, lean in the direction of your too muchness. At one point in my career, when I was in that environment that I was telling you about, I actually got asked to be Becca Light. I got asked to turn it down by 50%. And here's the thing. I didn't know how to process that request. Here I am, a regional sales manager, and my director asked me, says I'm too much and that I need to tone it down by 50%. I just left a company. I left Dell to go to this company, left a pretty prestigious role. And now I'm like, I have 4 kids. Now fear, the dragon's coming. And in seconds, I had to say, am I going to choose to go small, or am I going to stand up for myself and maybe get fired? And fear won that day. And I tried for 2 years to repackage myself, and it led to my demise. I've told you this, but I fell to the bathroom floor and a nervous breakdown, complete exhaustion, put the title on it. But I took myself to the bathroom floor. And when I fell, I didn't have enough energy to get up. So this is a type of stuff when you repackage yourself to fit in someone else's belief systems or ideals. These are the type of things that can happen to you. And don't do it.
No, do not minimize yourself because someone else's box is too small to contain. And because it's their own fear. They're afraid of, like, I was written up in performance reviews. I was called a bulldozer, but my all-time highest score for like really, really terrible performance reviews. Like, I wish I had kept this because it was kind of funny. It was that I left carnage in my wake. That's strangely evocative, but okay, whatever. So I was always be less, lower the bar, don't go so far. You're making us look bad. And not all the time, because I'm not saying like I'm a person, but like I was always like, I was trying to gauge the masses and try to pull myself back. And everyone's like, well, you have to go slower because the people can't keep up with you. And I'm like, well, then they should keep up. Why do I have to
Right.
slow down?
I've
Why
gotten
can't
that feedback too. I'm
Of
super
course, but
fast.
it's never like take the slow people and put a fire under their asses. It's like take your fire and dim it a little bit, cap it, push it down, make it quieter.
Yes.
It's one of the reasons why I kept getting fired. First of all, it's my autism. So I don't do office politics. They make no sense to me whatsoever. None. And I got fired 3 times in 10 years. And then I quit 3 other jobs and I decided I should probably do something on my own. I didn't go on my own because I had this fantastical, I'm going to go and do things on my own. No, I was literally unemployable. Taught myself Facebook because it was 2010 and I was unemployed. I just blew up my life, right? And lost my job and everything was scattered all over the place. And I had 2 boys to feed. And so I just went to a couple of contacts and I'm like, do you need help with marketing? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't know. What do you find hard? And they're like, well, what do you know about social media? So I said, nothing. Why? Is it hard? And they're like, yeah, we can't figure it out. So I'm like, all right. So I taught myself social media and built an entire company over the next 8 years to one of the 2 competitors in all of Canada for the real estate industry. And then eventually I sold my company and gave it to the other guy. And I'm like, here, you do it. I don't want to do it anymore. And then I chose to do this. So what I do now is I help people because I am not hindered by your obstacles.
Right.
We all put obstacles in front of us, right? So I can see, and my autism is awesome because it's pattern detection and I'm ADD. So I have 1,000 books open on every page going. So you'd start talking and I'm listening and I'm picking this. That looks like this. It sounds like this. Yep. Oh, you're not saying this. So I know you're not saying it, but I know you're feeling it. And then I'm able to create these amazing strategies to help people triple their incomes, completely change the leadership structure of their organizations, or just talk to their wives in a less combative way. There's all these different tools that I'm able to bring forward because I didn't matter for such a long time, and that's debilitating. And it comes down to is the only person you need to matter to is yourself. You create the standards by which you determine, did I do what I should be doing today? Did I live up to my own standard of excellence? What is my best mom? Was I my best mom today? Was I the best wife today? Was I the best coach? Was I the best interviewee? Like, did I get up early? Was I prepared? Okay, I was a little rushed on the shower part this morning, but anyway, it was okay. I still got here. The hair still looks good. Thank God I don't wear makeup because I'd be like totally sunk. I don't even know how to put it on. I gave up on that. So
I do the eyes. That's my thing. I got the eyes.
Yeah, I can't because then I rub my eyes and they look like a raccoon. So I just, never mind. Don't even worry about it. So that is why I'm so passionate, because imagine a world in which everyone felt in control. They felt like the work they did mattered to them and to the people around them, that they were emotionally regulated so that even when stressful things happen, they feel it, they go into those feelings, and then they process them so that they can continue to, even in situations of extreme grief, like if someone passes away, it's awful what you feel. You don't deny those feelings, you welcome them and you sit with them and you hang with them for a little bit. And you're like, yeah, I got all the feels. And then you continue to allow those things to be there, to welcome them instead of fighting them so that they don't stay. And you carry on. Like, this is the world that I try to bring for people. And as long as they're willing and open, it's possible. It's hard to be open though.
So we're at the point where we need to wind down. I knew 30 minutes was going to fly by for us. But what I want to, because you're a keynote speaker too, I do have a lot of leaders that listen to this podcast and people who are just connected, a lot of corporate folks who have connections. So I want to invite the listeners to explore bringing you in as a keynote. If Rebecca's story feels inspiring and the way that she approaches fear feels like, and getting into that GOAT status feels like something that your organization could use, how could a listener get in touch with you for keynote?
My website is always the best way to go. So rebeccamountain.ca. You can even email me directly, which is rebecca@rebeccamountain.ca. Make it real nice and simple. Email is always the best. If you want to get like right into me, just rebecca@rebeccamountain.ca. And I personalize my presentations, right? So I work with my clients on what is your biggest problem? Like right now, one of my clients' biggest problem is interconnectivity within the organization. Everyone's like little islands. How do we bring them back together again? So the message is still the dragon and the goat, but centered around connectivity. I did another corporate talk for a national sales and marketing team for a $10 billion company. And their whole thing was productivity, but also those negative self-talk. So people were holding themselves back. They weren't coming forward with ideas. They were waiting. They wouldn't even test it. Right? And so how can we create that confidence? But the challenge was also to the leadership to create an environment in which those kind of things were open and welcome and not crushed because like either it wasn't their idea or creating a bottleneck. And of course I talk to entrepreneurs and there's a different flavor altogether. So the dragon and the goat probably has cumulatively 20 to 30 different strategies on shrinking the dragon and bringing out your goat. And I work with my clients on personalizing which one of these are most important. And then I bring in stories and stuff. I love storytelling and I like being entertaining. So
me too.
That's good. So anyway, that's a long answer to a very simple question.
And then my last two questions is how can they find the book? Maybe that's your website. Maybe you want to point them to Amazon, but I'll let you answer that.
Both. You can go to my website. There's a tab at the top that says books. Click that and you can get it anywhere Amazon sells English. So, but if you're in Canada, Amazon.ca. If you're US, Amazon.com.
Perfect. And last question. What is like some words of wisdom you could close for the listener?
Oh, words of wisdom.
An empowering statement.
There's so many. There's a phrase that I've always lived by. And this is where I go to when I worry that I'm losing control. And it is that I always have a choice. I can choose to stay. I can choose to change. So change myself, change the environment, or I can choose to leave. You always have a choice. So, and it's not to say the choices are easy. Leaving relationships, hard. Sometimes leaving organizations, difficult. Some people say, well, I can't be my goat because I'm in an organization that won't, that doesn't encourage that. And I'm like, then leave.
Right.
Like, there's that kata, like go there and find something, right? To always believe that you have a choice is what opens the door for you to start challenging the dragon that's telling you you don't. And you start listening to that teensy tiny little voice that gets stronger and stronger, which is your greatest of all time, just itching for you to give it a little bit more attention. Because the tagline on the book is the one that wins is the one you feed.
Ooh,
so be careful where you're putting your focus. But
love
you
it.
Have a choice.
Oh my gosh, Rebecca, thank you so much for coming
on.
Thank
you. This has been fun.
It was so fun. And we'll put all her links in the show notes as always. And once again, thank you for coming on.
Thanks, honey. Thank you so much. It's been great.